What's going on, everybody? Welcome back in. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. I am Collin, joined today with Tyler. We are 1 week closer to Iowa football. We are officially 10 days out as we are recording this on Wednesday night. Most of you guys listening will probably be listening to this on Thursday or Friday, meaning we will be in the single digits. So it is coming in a hurry. So what we're going to do today is three different things. We're going to start off with buy, sell, or hold, and I'll get into more about what that all means here soon. Talk a little bit more about Iowa's defense. I feel like we rarely ever talk about Iowa's defense, so we're going to get into, can it be better than last year's defense? And then also Big Ten Network stopped by on, what was that, last Friday for the camp tour. We'll just talk a little bit about what they had to say and then some other fall camp insights from this last week since our last episode. First, buy, sell, or hold. So essentially what this is, and I take it from 24/7 Sports, Sean Bach, David Eicholt, every year around this time of year, they always do a buy, sell, or hold of different scenarios. They did an article of whether they buy stock in it, like, yes, I think it's going to happen. Sell it, meaning, I don't feel confident in it, or I don't think they did hold, but we're going to do hold, where pretty much we're kind of in the middle. Like, we don't really know. We feel good, but at the same time, it's like, I kind of have to wait to see it to believe it. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to start first with the first one. And a lot of these are taken from 24/7. I put a few towards the end of my own scenarios, but a lot of these are what was asked to David Eicholt and Sean Bach. All right, so the first one. 2 running backs with over 1,000 yards and a wide receiver with 500 or more yards. Tyler, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I went with sell. I have to see this offense first. And maybe I should have went hold here, but I just feel like, first of all, with it being, I feel like maybe more of a stable of running backs, kind of like what we did last year, maybe who go with, who's the hot hand or whatnot. I just don't know if 2 running backs are going to get to 1,000 yards. I feel like that's asking for a little bit there. And
Yeah.
then, maybe even same with the wide receivers. 500 yards is not a lot, but when you're spreading the wealth around, and like I feel like Iowa kind of does, we don't really ever have that one go-to guy, it seems like. I just feel like that might be a tough ask as well. So I went with sell.
Yeah, I did sell as well. And yeah, I mean, with the wide receiver, I mean, getting to 500 yards should happen, and I think it could happen. But the 2 running backs, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a running back by committee. So, I mean, I could see maybe running back getting to 1,000 yards, but having 2, because when you think about it, there's going to be games where, okay, LaShawn Williams does really good, has over 100 yards, but then, he's the main guy that game because he's doing really good. So then the other 3 backs aren't going to play very much. And then the next game, it could be Caleb Johnson that is going off. And so he's getting the bulk of the carries. Yeah. So it's going to be a running back by committee type of approach. And I think we're going to get to 2,000 total yards altogether, but it's going to be between 4 or 5 running backs. And so each guy might get, 600, 700 yards, maybe 800 yards. So yeah, I don't think we're going to crack that. A wide receiver will lead the team in catches.
I went with sell here as well. I just feel like, Luke Lachey, tight end, quarterback's best friend right there. I feel like he has a better shot at it. I still feel like, with Tim Lester, he's still going to want to utilize the tight ends like he had mentioned kind of in the offseason. I still feel like that'll be sort of the same approach. And I feel like Cade has when he was healthy last year, when they both were, they had a pretty good connection. So I feel like that's more likely in my opinion.
Yeah, you hammered it. I'm going to say sell as well. Especially this year, maybe moving forward after this year, maybe we'll have a better chance of saying buy in that regard, because I do think Lester likes to get the wide receivers involved. But when you have such a good tight end in Luke Lachey, can be a day, maybe a day 2 draft pick. Hell, if he has a really good year, maybe even a day 1 draft pick. I know that's hard to believe, but you go back, what was it, 2018 or what year was it, where TJ Hawkinson and Noah Fant both went in the first round. So it can happen if he has a really good year. I mean, look at Sam Laporta. I mean, he should have went, in the first round if you really think about it. So you gotta utilize a guy like that, and then you have guys like Addison Ostrengo who is just as capable. Iowa's offense ranks 90 plus in production. meaning like scoring, total
Yeah.
offense, things like that.
Maybe this is just me trying not to jinx the offense, but I'm gonna say hold here, actually. I just need to wait and see how this offense plays out. I need to see it with my own eyes in 10 days. Now I know that the opponent isn't what we're gonna be seeing, coming down the road in the Big Ten, but with just how bad we have been. And again, I know it's Tim Lesher, not his fault. He's trying to change it, but I just need to see what this looks like. And there's still some question marks on offense, right? We've talked about it, like crazy on this podcast. So I just want to wait and see. I'm going to hold right now. I don't want to
So
put a number on it. That's my thing. I don't want to put a number on it yet.
yeah, exactly. So like what would the last 4 years or last 3 years, we were like 128th, 129th. So to get to 90, that's a pretty big jump, even though 90th is still not great.
No.
But it's a pretty big jump. And I'm not going to say like I'm less confident since like camp has started, but I think there's definitely more of like a wait to see. And I know we have said that, numerous times on this podcast, but I think it's even more true now. It's kind of like we got to temper our expectations a little bit, because I do think that there's going to be certain things that's just going to take time. And we'll get into it a little bit later with the BTM bus tour, but Lester kind of hinted towards that a little bit, like how like it's a work in progress. Like there's things like I think he mentioned something about being aggressive. Like that's something that they're still trying to like get better at, and it's just going to be a work in progress. Now the run game is going to be their bread and butter, and I think they're really going to hammer that, and then hopefully everything else just kind of works in. So for right now, I'm going to say I think we're going to be really close to 90, if not above. But right now, I'm just going to say sell, because the last how many years I probably would have said buy, and then I look like an idiot. And I rather say sell and then it not happen and we actually do really good, because I'll be the first to admit that I was dead wrong about it. Iowa quarterbacks, whether it's Cade or Sullivan, will throw 25 plus touchdown passes this year.
I'm going to sell on that right now. I just think, for reference, we had 9 passing touchdowns last year. Obviously,
I don't
not
even know.
good,
I should have
bad,
looked.
horrible. I think I looked it up. I think it was 9.
Jesus.
Horrible, horrible, horrible. Will we be better than that? Yes, we will be better than that. But I just, right now, my question marks still remain a little the same with the passing game and, the consistency at quarterback, and if Cade's going to be healthy and if he's, going to be consistent, or whoever that guy is, right? Sullivan, a new guy. So I'm going to sell on that right now. Plus, I do think, Iowa's still going to be more focused on the run game. So I'm going to sell.
You hammered everything I was going to say, especially about the run game. And this is the reason why I'm going to say sell, because I really do think our main focus, our main thing is going to be running the football. Like that is what we're going to do. I think we're going to do it very well. And that is just what we're going to hammer. And so if that's the case, yeah, I mean, how many chances are we going to get to get passing touchdowns at that point? So I'm going to say sell at this point. Over 2,000 rushing yards and 1,500 yards receiving. I think on 24/7, I think they had originally 1,000 yards receiving, but I think they were talking just wide receivers. And I'm like, I wanted to make it where 1,500 yards, but this includes tight ends too. So 2,000 yards rushing and 15 yards receiving, tight ends and wide receivers and running backs all combined.
I don't know. This is tough. Because I looked it up, like last year, we had like 1,600 yards rushing when the defense basically knew every play. Same with, I think we had like a total of it was only like 1,600 yards passing. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility when you're looking at total stats from, the entire team, when you're talking about, like you said, the tight ends, the receivers, other running backs, everything like that. The offense should be better. I'm going to buy. I'm going to buy that.
I'm going to say buy as well, because you look at the last 2 years, like go back to even 2022, we had 2,000 yards receiving and 1,200 rushing yards. So I honestly, this one I would buy in a heartbeat, because we should easily get, I mean, if we got to 1,600 last year,
I don't think it's
with
unattainable.
Deacon Hill, or 2 years ago, 2,000 with Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla, like we should easily get over 1,500. And then I think, yeah, if we're not as like what's the word, where defenses know what's coming. If we
Predictable,
are,
yeah.
yeah, predict not less predictable, we should be able to run the football more, and which should allow more rushing yards. So I'm going to say
Yeah.
bye. The
Yeah.
Iowa offense under Lester improves to 25 points per game.
This was tough for me, but I'm going to buy it. I really believe the whole Brian Ferentz 25 points per game, the fact that it's in writing and everything just was a recipe for a disaster, right? And I feel like now that you don't have him anymore, we don't have that stupid contract. We can just, I feel like, hopefully play more freely, play in a better scheme, a more updated scheme. I feel like getting to 25 shouldn't be that unrealistic. And, we're talking 9 more points. I think we had like 15.4 points per game last year, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking like 8.5 more points a game. I hope that we can get to that point, right? And so maybe that's a little bit me, more wishful thinking than actually buying stock. But no, I hope and I believe that it can happen.
Yeah, I'm going to go buy as well because it all kind of averages itself out. So, if we can just have a few games where, hey, maybe we can actually, against a shitty opponent like Troy Northern or in Eastern Illinois or Illinois State, excuse me, maybe actually put up like what we used to do where when we
Right.
played those bad teams where we could put up 40, 45, 50 points.
Correct.
And then if you can do that, then yeah, you might have a game or two where you don't really put up many points, but it kind of all balances each other out, averages each other out. And so 25 points per game, I think is very reasonable, and it should happen. Like it shouldn't be that difficult to get 25
Well,
points per game.
and really quick, not to cut you off, but and a point that you brought up even on our last episode, if we can just, score some points against ranked opponents, doesn't that help the average
That
as well and not just score zero, right?
92 to
So
0. Yeah.
yeah.
Like last year.
So that hurts the average quite a bit
It
there. So
does.
yes,
Yep.
correct.
So I'm going to say buy as well. How much more do I think we're going to get above
Yeah.
25? I don't know. That's a question to remain, but I think it's very reasonable to say we should get to 25 points per game. Iowa will have 3 rushing touchdowns, more than 30 yards.
I'm going to buy it. I think Tim Lester focusing on the run game like we talked about, as well as being aggressive, more explosive plays like he's talked about. I really feel like that may come in the run game, more so the pass game.
Yep.
And so I think that we can accomplish that. I think that's a realistic thing. I'm gonna buy stock into that.
I'm going to say buy strictly because, hey, if we can do it last year, which we did a couple times, LaShawn Williams, long run against
Yep.
Wisconsin,
Yep,
Caleb
Wisconsin, that's right.
Johnson, long run against Purdue. Like, if we can do it in that offensive system, you can't tell me it can't happen in this offense system. So I'm going to 100%, like, that is one where it's like I would feel so confident I would put so much money down to buy that. Iowa will have 4 passing touchdowns, more than 40 yards.
And this is where I'm going to sell because
Yeah.
like I just said, that kind of, alluded to that in the last question. I just don't feel as confident about it in the pass game. I have to wait and see it with my own eyes first, just because
Yep.
I haven't seen it in a long time. So I'm going to sell.
Plus, we've been hearing how, the passing game is still trying to not catch up, or just trying to still get its self figured out a little bit is kind of what we're hearing during this fall camp. And so if that's the case, then, the passing game probably isn't going to be that crisp to begin with. So to say we would have 4 passing touchdowns over 40 yards, that's kind of a reach at this point. So I'm going to say sell. Iowa averages over 4.5 yards per carry.
I'm going to buy it. Last year, we averaged 3.3 yards per carry with, like I mentioned before, every defense loading the box with 9, 10
Yeah.
guys, right? So if we're respectable through the pass game with our motions, with our new scheme that the defense has to actually respect other things, I don't see why that is, unrealistic. So I'm going to buy that all day.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy it as well because I keep harping on the running game and the rushing attack, and just hearing every time there's been insights about fall camp, like one of the most consistent things is the running attack, the offensive line crane push, and it's just a good sign. It's something, you have a experienced offensive line, you have capable running backs, And now hopefully you're in a system where, yes, like you said, it's less predictable. Defenses respect you a little bit more. And so not only do I think we need to average around 4.5 yards per carry, we need to get back to that number. Because if you can get to that number, you have a decently healthy offense at that point.
Yeah.
The defense allows fewer points per game than last year, which we averaged 14.8 points per game last year.
It's crazy, but I want to buy it. The reason being, you got 8 guys returning on defense, right? I think we all know that. But every time I swear, like I feel like we lose guys from the previous year, and we're just on paper maybe not as good. We always are right back in the mix for an elite defense under Phil Parker, and he proves me wrong every time. So it's a tall order. You got a new Big Ten, but again, I go back to besides Ohio State, I like our chances in a lot of these games. You mentioned it, maybe favored in most, if not all, besides Ohio State.
Yep.
The defense, I think, will stand up to most of the teams on our schedule. So I'm going to buy it.
I'm going to go hold as of right now because I agree with what you say where I want to buy it. But at the same time, we also have to remember we're not playing the Big Ten West anymore. Now, this year we got lucky because we do play a lot of teams in the Big Ten West, but we still have to play, Ohio State, UCLA, Washington. Although Washington's losing a lot of guys, they are bringing in like an offensive-minded coach from Arizona. So you would imagine that their offense should be decent anyway. So with that being said, you are going to be playing a little bit better offenses this year compared to what you were last year. And so that's why I'm just going to hold for right now. But I can definitely see it still being the case. We see a 2-quarterback system in some games this year.
While I like the idea of it, I'm going to go sell. Again, I just don't think that that's really something Kirk likes to do or really wants to mess around with. Plus, when you look at Cade's injury history, is it worth the risk of playing or, mixing and matching 2 guys in games? Like, you need your quarterback to be able to step in and operate if and when Cade were to get hurt or something like that. Talking about Sullivan. So I'm gonna sell that.
Yeah, I'm gonna put that on hold as well because I agree with like Kirk Ferentz. It's going to be interesting to see if maybe Lester has a little bit more pull into maybe something in regards to that. Because when I say a 2-quarterback system, I am not 1-2-quarterback system where it's like, okay, we don't really know who the starter is, so we're just going to play each guy. What I mean by that, like what I kind of want is like, okay, if you go with Cade, that's great. But maybe a couple games, you have 1 or 2 packages where you bring in Sullivan for a couple plays in a drive just to kind of shake things up a little bit with his running ability. I think that just creates a little bit of pressure on the defense a little bit. So like I would love it. And I think even like maybe Lester would, because I really do think like Lester probably deep down thinks Sullivan's probably, can run his offense maybe a little bit better than like Cade can. I don't know. That's not me that's kind of what I think. And so like I could see him maybe advocating for something like that where it's like, okay, well, if we're going to go with Cade, let's have a couple packages where Sullivan comes in, a couple of drives here or there. So I'm going to say hold for right now. And then we have a wide receiver that gets over 600 yards.
Again, tough. I said sell. I should have probably said hold and wait and see, more of approach because I want to see what this looks like. But I did say sell. And again, obviously, Deacon Hill is our quarterback last year. So, I went back and looked, and Nico was the leading receiver on the team with 255 yards, which is when I saw that, I mean, I knew that stat. I remembered it, but it's like it just hit me like, man, we were that bad. So 600, quite the jump from 255. But if you have a better offense and more consistent quarterback play, I don't think it's unachievable. Again, with the tight ends and all the different receivers and running backs, I don't know. I'm going to go sell.
I'm going to go buy because I do think like we're playing the long game here. And I think Lester realizes like we got to start showing the world, like we got to start using the wide receivers because
that's true.
We need to start like landing some wide receivers in the offseason. It can't come down to like where we can't find anyone. And then all of a sudden, we just have to, and I'm not saying this in a bad way because I'm glad we got Jacob Gill, but it's like, oh, we just get, we have to get Jacob Gill because we didn't get the guy from the main Raylan Sharp, who was like the FCS All-American player who went
Yeah.
to Fresno State, or we didn't get Eli Green who went to Iowa State, right? We were looking at him hard. So one of these years, we got to start showing where it's a little bit easier to land some guys, like land some wide receivers. And so you got to start sometime. So why not just start in year one? So then going into year two, you can be like, see, look at what we did 2 years ago. The main wide receiver had 200 some yards. Look at this year. In just 1 year, the main wide receiver had 700 yards. Still not great, but look at the jump. Like, look at that. Like, look at what I'm doing. Makes it a little bit easier to sell someone. So whether it is Caleb Brown, whether it's Jacob Gill, whether it's someone like that, I think we should. When you look at Iowa State, for example, I looked at like their top wide receivers last year, and I know they're more of an air raid. I get that. But, they had one that was over or close to 1,000. They had another one close to or a little over 800 yards. So you can't tell me we can't get one wide receiver over 600. Like, come on. Like, that should happen. Even if you are a running team, you should get at least one guy over 600 yards. The defense creates more turnovers this year compared to last year. So last year we had 10 interceptions and 5 fumbles. So 15 turnovers altogether.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy it. I feel like I don't know exactly who I heard it, but I know it was like in an interview, and they were just asking, like, I don't know if it was Phil or if it was some of the players, and they're like, how are you guys even going to be able to improve upon kind of what you did last year? And they were like, I think a point of emphasis was to create more turnovers for our offense, to help our offense out even more. And so I feel like that is a point of emphasis for Phil Parker this offseason. And so I like hearing that, and I do think, like you said, 10 interceptions, 5 fumbles. I do think we'll beat that mark. So I'm going to buy that.
Yep. 2 years ago, we had 15 interceptions. 2021, we had 25 interceptions. So last year was definitely a down year in terms of interceptions and just turnovers in general. And like you said, I did hear that. I think it might have been Phil Parker that said that about, that's been kind of the emphasis going into this year. And so just creating turnovers. And I think we can easily get to that number, because last year, like I said, like looking at that, you kind of forget, like, man, like usually we're like ball hawks on defense when it comes to getting turnovers. And last year was definitely a down year despite having such a good year defensively. So the last one, Cade starts the year, but solely finishes the year, whether it's production or injuries.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it could be
you're right,
either.
Right. It could be, Cade, like you said, Cade got hurt, or Cade was just too inconsistent that solely ended up coming in. I'm going to hold it all. It all is a waiting game, right? It remains to be seen. I just think the question, I don't know how long it will take, I guess, if that were the case, to make that switch. If it's earlier than maybe, what we're used to, or what I'm thinking, but it's definitely a possibility. I just think, with Tim and the way he wants to do things, and maybe, like you said, some of the leeway and pull maybe he has now, if Cade and obviously if he got hurt, obviously, Sully's going to play, but even if it's the consistency thing, I could see it happening. I really could, because this schedule, I mean, like I said, it's 10 wins is achievable. It's, can you go beyond that? It's, like you said, the question. So I'm going to hold.
Yeah, I'm going to go hold as well for right now, because I really don't know how things are going to shake out. And we'll get more into some fall camp insights with Cade McNamara and kind of his bounce back week last week in fall camp, if that's true. And so if Cade starts here, stays healthy, and is decently consistent, like, Kirk Ferentz like wants to keep him, like loyalty wise, wants to keep Cade out there. And so I think really the only way is if like Cade gets like hurt, and it's like, yeah, Sullivan has to come in. So that's why I'm going to go hold for right now, because I truly don't know. All right, the next thing we're going to get into is the defense. We're going to talk about this on the last episode, but time was getting away from us, and we really try to stick to about 40 to 45 minutes long. So the question is, can this defense be as good or better than last year's defense? I do want to start off with this, Tyler, because I've been seeing a lot on like Twitter, and I know it's like, who cares? But whenever you got like some of these like college football accounts, whether it's like a big account like Bleacher Report or like On3, or even just like a random account that brings up Iowa's defense, you get a lot of replies of people being like, Yeah, but when they play ranked teams, they're not very good. And like you go back to last year, we lost, 92-0 against 3 ranked teams. But for the casual viewer, yeah, that's the case. But if you actually watch the games, you actually see like what our defense goes through, then you understand like, okay, yes, we technically gave up 92 points in those 3 games, but we really kind of didn't, because number one, in all 3 games, our offense was so bad, so many 3-and-outs. Like I'm not going to go through it all, but I charted like how many 3-and-outs we had in all 3 of those games. And I'm talking the Penn State game, Michigan game, and Tennessee game. I will say this though. So the Penn State game, the score at half was 10-0. They had 1 touchdown that started at the 39-yard line because we had that punt that was like muffed. Remember that? And then their other touchdown, it came at the 19-yard line because Cade McNamara fumbled. So all in our territory to begin with. So technically speaking, they kind of finished with like 17 points if you take away those 2 touchdowns. That was not because of our defense. Michigan game. This one's my all-time favorite because we lose 26-0. But we hold J.J. McCarthy, who's now in the NFL, by the way, to 147 yards. They had 10 points at half, 10-0 at half, just like the Penn State game. How many teams would die to be down only 10-0 against the national champion?
Yeah.
How many teams would? I mean, seriously. Yeah. Their first touchdown started at the 5-yard line because of our special teams, and their other touchdown started at the 6-yard line because of our pathetic offense. So both of their touchdowns, all they needed was 5 yards and 6 yards to score. You take away those 2 touchdowns, they only scored 12 points, all field goals. And then Tennessee, yes, I will give them their first 14 points because they were both drives that, they started, in their territory and went down the field. So I'll give them that. But it was still only 14-0 at half. And then in the second half, their next touchdown came at the 2-yard line because Deacon Hill fumbled. So all they needed was 2 yards. And then their other touchdown was a pick 6. So that nothing to do with our defense. And then they had a touchdown at the end of the game when the score was 28-0. So technically speaking, we gave up 21 points that game. So point being said, I wanted to bring that up because it's like, yes, we gave up 92 points against ranked teams last year, and every other game we were dominant. But I still think we were dominant for the most part, especially that Michigan game, regardless of the score.
Yeah, no, if you're an Iowa fan, you're a diehard Iowa fan, you watch every game, you know exactly what you just kind of laid out, right? You know what this defense goes through. The defense, to their credit, will never complain about it, will never really acknowledge it. They got to be better. Can't, put our offense, they say all the right things, but let's be real. They're, I think, the best defense in the entire country because of what our offense puts them through on a consistent basis, right? Like, I think that's the bigger point is, no, they're not going to be number one in every stat, because when you're giving the opposing offense great field position because Deacon Hill fumbles every third play, they're bound to give up a touchdown every once in a great while. So the stats are very misleading like that, Collin, and we all know as Iowa fans that like the casual fan is going to see 92-0 and be like, when they play somebody tough, they're not very good. No, they're very good. You got to watch the game and realize this offense might have been our own defense's worst enemy, not the opposing team sometimes, which is crazy to think about.
Yep, exactly. So the question remains then, can this defense, because the hope is with the offense now being hopefully slightly better, where instead of getting, 5 consecutive, seriously, like this charting that I did, we the Tennessee game, going into half, we had 4 consecutive 3-and-outs. You know what I mean? So this year now with the offense, hopefully we can sustain some drives, even if we don't put up points. Can you get a few first downs where the defense is off the field for 4 or 5 minutes of game time, plus then even more minutes, because when you count in TV timeouts and things like that, can you do that?
Right.
Where they can, I don't know, catch a breath, maybe make adjustments. Hell, so many times, like last year, they would walk off the field. Oh, a minute later, okay, back on the field because our offense would go 3 now in less than a minute. that Penn State game, for example, how many plays did they run? It was like almost like a record. It was like 97 plays Penn
Yeah, it
State
was
ran.
insane.
And you watch that game, and then it's like you go into the next week, and you're like, God, how is our defense? I mean, how are they even going to be able to do it
Motivated.
with
Yeah.
how many plays they had to run last week? And then they play Michigan State, and I know Michigan State wasn't a very good team, but they completely dominated them. And it's like, holy shit! Like, how are they able to do this after like coming off of like a 97 plays that they had to run last week against Penn State? It's just,
Yeah.
it's incredible. It really is.
And that's why I do believe that this defense can be better than even last
Yeah.
year, because you have 8 of those guys, eight starters that played last year. They're coming
Yep.
back, like we talked about. You still have the GOAT, Phil Parker, getting these guys ready to go, calling the defense. I just, and like you said, the offense you would think will just be this much
Slightly
better
better.
and not put them in as many awful situations where
Yep.
I think, again, I don't have, like, that's the thing. I always say this every year. It's like, well, geez, how can the defense play any better? And it seems like every year
Yeah. The last
they're
3 years, it's like
about
gotten
as
better.
good, if not better, than the
Yep.
previous. So I don't know why that trend wouldn't continue.
Think it really comes down to me, like the defensive line depth,
Yes,
because
correct.
if
I was
we
gonna,
have
yep,
developed that depth, like it's going to play a huge factor. Because one thing last year that I think we were not that good at, and it's kind of surprising the defense was so good because of this area was lacking a little bit, and that was pass rush. We really
yes,
weren't that great in pass rush last year. I'm not saying
no,
it was horrible, but it wasn't that great. So that is one thing where if like, and that's one of the things that they keep talking about, where it's like that's what they're focusing on, because they know that like this defense can be even better if we have a pass rush. And so if this defense can have some sort of a pass rush or better pass rush than last year, then this defense has every right to be maybe
yep,
better than last year's defense, which is just, like you said, it's just hard to imagine, because like it seemed like last year at this time we talked about that, like, can this defense be better than the 2022 defense? And it's like, God,
you
I don't know
doubt
if you
it, and
can
you're
be
like,
better, and then it
right,
happens, and it's like,
yeah.
geez.
Well, and
um
I counted, so I went back and I saw that the defensive line had like 24 sacks total last year, 9 coming from Joe Evans, and I just feel like that that's achievable, man. Like if
yeah,
you can, but that's the thing. Who's going to be the dominant, the next Joe Evans, if you will, right?
yep.
Like on the edge. Who, do we have the depth at D tackle? Like, yeah, the defensive line, I would think is going to be maybe that determining factor if it can get back to, what it's been, or if not better, for sure.
Like, I like Deontay Craig and Ethan Herkett, but I just wish, like, can you imagine if like this year we had like an AJ Epinenza, where
I
it's just
know
like that
that
dominant pass
the
rusher.
yep, the
I'm
go-to
not
guy.
saying they can't be that, but just, yeah, that go-to guy where he comes in like on third
Yep, third
downs,
down.
or
Yep.
who was it 2 years ago? They got drafted to the Packers. Why can't I think of his name right now? But Van Ness, like
Yeah.
someone like that, just that dominant guy that every time
Yep.
he's out there, like you better double team that guy, because if you don't, he's getting to the quarterback. So yeah, if
Yep.
we can figure that out, and then also going back to one of the the bicellular hole with the turnovers, like if we can this year maybe turn the ball over a
Yep.
little bit more compared to last year, because that was something that we were definitely down, it's going to make this defense that much better. And then you obviously
Right.
incorporate the offense, hopefully being better. I will say though that yes, we will be playing a little bit better offenses this year. So that's maybe a slight like maybe we won't be as good, but I'm not really worried about that. I think if with everybody returning, and if the offense
Yeah.
is just slightly better, I do think it can be at least just as good.
Comparable. Yep.
Maybe not better, but I think just as good, I think would be the right answer, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
So,
And like I said, I think I hate to say it, but literally our own worst enemy has been our offense. And
yeah.
I truly believe if we're a little bit better on that, I really feel like it gives our defense just that much more ability to play even better, right? Than they're
Yep,
even capable.
exactly.
So yeah.
All right, let's flip now to just a little bit of fall camp insights. We had Big Ten bus tour that came in on Friday of last week, which I never really take much from what they say, because what are they going to say? Are they going to say anything bad about any Big Ten
Right.
school? No, they're not, because it's almost like a
Correct.
selling, like,
Yes.
they're going to want to tell like, oh yeah,
Promoting
this team
the
looks
Big Ten.
good. Yeah, they're promoting the Big Ten. So for me, I listen to it, or watch it, I should say, more just to hear with what like Tim Lester says, or the
Yeah.
coordinators, and then like Kirk Ferentz. I guess for me, like, Phil Parker saying how the secondary is the weakest. And I think that was just him just trying to
crazy line.
Placing motivation on maybe the secondary. Maybe they've been a little complacent and he's just trying to spark something, for them. Because I have a hard time believing that that's a weak position when you have Quinn Schulte and Xavier on the back end. You have Jamari Harris, and then you got 3 guys that are all capable of starting on the other side. Like, I have a hard time believing that that is a weak position group.
And Castro to an extent, playing back there a little bit. So
But maybe if you compare to the linebackers and the defensive line, maybe you can say it's the weakest position group. But what does that mean? Like, okay, how much
nitpicking here?
At that point. What else was said? I think LaShawn Williams and LaShawn Williams and Luke Lachey just talking about, like, may the best quarterback win the job. And I think that's kind of something you and I have been saying from day one. It's like, we don't really care who it is. As long as it's a true quarterback competition, which I think it is, then I don't care who it is, because whoever trots out there week 1, that means that person had a better fall camp. And I'm okay with that person then being the quarterback. So may the best guy win. I think that's true. Kirk Ferentz really didn't say much besides just the leadership of this team. He keeps talking about that, which is true when you factor in all the 5th-year, 6th-year seniors. A lot of guys that could have easily left, came back. I do think the leadership of this team is really, really good. Tim Lester, I talked about this in the buy, seller, hold. You can tell that there's a little bit of, like, I'm going to say he seems less confident, but, like, you can definitely tell he's kind of like, it's still a work in progress. Like, we still got a long ways to go. We're definitely going to be good at some things, but there's definitely things that like we got to get better at. We got to keep improving. We only have 2 weeks left. Like, time's running out, but we got to get, to where we need to be at. So I kind of got that sense out of him.
Yeah. The only other thing, I guess, and maybe this is just coach speak and Tim just expecting more out of the guys, but he was saying how, like, he's like, we got to be better than what we showed today. And I just wondered if he said that because he had noticed, obviously, those guys were there watching the practice and maybe they didn't have that great of a day. I don't know. But, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I'm nervous. Like, we know, like you said, it's a work in progress, but we're 10 days out. Like, we got to get this thing figured out. And obviously some of those questions will hopefully be answered here, week 1, like starter, quarterback, and just, if we can continue to grow this offense. So we'll know sooner rather than later.
I also want to point out, I'm not going to say everything that Brad Heinrichs, the head of Swarm, said, because I just don't think that that's maybe right to say everything, because, he includes that in the VIP on 3 and 24/7 for a reason. And then he attended the closed private scrimmage, the big scrimmage that they have every year to kind of determine things on Saturday. And he kind of said the same thing that, we've been kind of talking about and been kind of hearing. Run game looks good. Passing game still a work in progress. Defense looks elite. Reese Dakin is a hell of a punter. And Drew Stevens is a hell of a kicker. So our special teams, I think, is good. So that's kind of what he said. And that's kind of something like I said, we've been hearing, like, everything's been kind of consistent.
Yeah. I think the big thing is, we've heard some of this type of stuff in the past, and we've maybe been a little more disappointed than
exactly.
But that's more for Brian Ferentz more than anything. And so I agree. Like, no, are these guys going to come on and talk, say that Iowa looks bad? No, but at the same time, these guys, they're respectable guys. They're pretty straight shooters. I feel like they're not going to sugarcoat anything too much. I don't think so. I trust what they have to say. Yeah.
Yep. I guess we will find out in less than 10 days, because it is almost here. Next week at this time, we will be talking the first game. Colby will be on the show. We're finding Colby back. We're going to do our game by game season predictions for Iowa, our final prediction for the year. We always want to wait till close to the season as possible, because obviously with injuries, things like that, we kind of want to wait till then. So we're going to do that. We're going to get into the Illinois State preview. It's going to be a fun episode. So I'm really looking forward to that. So hopefully you guys stay tuned for that. But with that being said, we will end it there. Have a good rest of your week, and go Hawks.